Wise Global Citizen Europe. In here, I will be interviewing people on their insights to solutions to the world's biggest problems. Hi everyone, so today's topic is modern day slavery. To start the conversation, I brought with me my passport. This passport has allowed me to travel to 16 different countries and live in 3 and make it back home easily. This is not a luxury that people involved in modern day slavery have. They are forced to work in hard conditions with little to no pay, and some have their passports taken away so they are unable to leave that country. Modern day slavery looks a little different than it did back then. Modern day slaves are threatened with violence against themselves or their families if they don't comply. Modern day slaves work in all areas, such as garment factories, picking fruit, restaurants, mining for minerals, and building houses. It is very hard to escape modern day slavery without outside help from people or organizations willing to help. Ben Skinner is the founder and president of Transparentum. He's an investigative journalist. Him and his team's goal is to eradicate environmental and human rights abuses in the global supply chain. He's going to share with us some of his solutions to the modern day slavery issue and how each of us can make a difference. Hi Ben, so nice to have you here today.
Real pleasure. Thanks for having me, Marie.
And so today we're going to be talking about modern day slavery.
We are, yeah. Shall I begin by describing what that term means? So when people think of slavery, they oftentimes rightly go back in history, right, to the sepia-toned photographs and the stories of ancestors on either side of that terrible crime. In the real world today, there are more slaves than at any point in human history. And that is using a definition of slavery that is true today as it was 400 years ago, as it was 2,000 years ago. Slaves are those forced to work, held through fraud, under threat of violence for no pay beyond subsistence. This is the definition that I had adopted when I was writing this book, A Crime So Monstrous, 10 years ago. It's a narrow and simple and terrible definition. These are people that cannot walk away from their work without dire consequences to them or their families. And it's a crime that should animate all of us, particularly your generation, Marie, to step up and make sure that this isn't so by the end of your lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that definition. And now maybe you could, if you want to go into more depth, or if you want to start on kind of some of your solutions and what you've been doing to kind of solve the crisis or try to make a dent in it.
Sure. So I've been working at this for 20 years now. And in that time, I've had the opportunity to talk to hundreds of both folks that were enduring slavery when I was speaking to them, as well as those who had come up from bondage, who had freed themselves or had managed to find the internal fortitude to resist, to run away, and manage to survive the process of the threats and the violence that would engender to do that. And so, in that process, you begin to realize, and when I was writing this book, what struck me was I began looking at this kind of in an academic way, right? Begin with the definition. Okay, let's try to quantify it. Let's try to find these individuals. And what you very quickly come to is this is much more than academic. This is a life or death situation for millions of people around the world. Most credible estimates from the International Labor Organization are 45 million people around the world. And so in order for them to receive some kind of justice, it really takes all of us looking at where these people are in our communities, and in many cases they are they're the people that that within any society they're the outcasts. In India, they will be actually literally the Dalit. They will be the oppressed caste. In other societies, they're undocumented immigrants. And so I think we have to really approach those individuals with a great degree of compassion and listening. That's step A. Step B, understand what it is that you buy. Understand that all of us, particularly in the West, have a role, and we make a moral decision every time we purchase something. Sorry, you're competing with the birds here, which is a luxury problem to have, I should say. But every time we buy something, where does the tantalum in this phone come from? Does it come from a mine in the Congo that is using child slave labor? And if Apple can't trace it, then it's up to us as the consumers to say, get better, and understand if you can't tell me the components that go into the transponder in this phone, then you aren't doing your job, and I will go somewhere else. I'll go to Fairphone. I'll go to some ethical alternative. So in our daily lives, before we even put on the trappings of working for a nonprofit or something to do all this, there is so much that we can do as individuals.
Just on a daily basis, just being more aware of what we do.
Exactly.
And what we buy.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. That was incredibly informing. And being able to realize that such a big and dark problem can have impacts on all of us, and also that we can make impacts on it just by small things. Demanding that Apple and other companies show us where their materials come from, and just thinking about that and demanding that the companies do better.
And your generation is really good at social media.
Yeah.
In a way that prior generations never could have even conceived, right? When the original abolitionist movement to end the slave trade in the world began in the 18th century, the late 18th century, there were 12 people sitting around a table and saying essentially, okay, we're gonna overthrow. Imagine 12 people sitting around a table today and saying, we're gonna overthrow the global auto industry. It was that big in scale. And within 20 years in England, they had banned the sale of human beings. Within 60 years, within 80 years actually from the beginning of that, the US had abolished slavery. Today, however, there are more slaves than ever. That doesn't mean that they didn't do a lot of work that was effective. They made it illegal. But now we have to take the next step as individuals. And that's, again, where social media can play a key role. Ashton Kutcher has been terrific about being a leader on this. Every time we do work at Transparentum, he tweets it out. 18 million people learn through his tweet about forced labor that we have found in products that they were buying. That's power, that's communication, and that's the way ultimately we end the problem.
Well, that's all heavy stuff, but also in a way also encouraging, and also, just, what's the word? Sorry. Encouraging that we can also fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We shouldn't cry ourselves to sleep at night. We can do a lot.
Yeah.
We should sleep well, knowing that we can make a big difference the next day.
Well, thank you again so much for meeting with me.
Real pleasure, Marie. I'm so glad you're doing this. Congratulations, and thanks for being a leader.